Was it prophesied or hidden in the Bible that in the year 2020 we would have coronavirus and a worldwide quarantine? Stick around to the end of this video, which will only be 4 or 5 minutes, and you decide. But before I show you this, I have to show you that there's a precedent for what I'm about to do. So the technique that I'm about to use has been used before. So listen carefully. Hashem your God will return your captivity and have mercy on you. He will return you and gather you in from all the nations where Hashem your God scattered you. This is Deuteronomy 30, verse 3. There's a mystical idea that each verse in the Torah corresponds to a year in history. Verse number 1200 relates to the year 1200, and verse 3692 would correlate to the year 3692 of the Hebrew calendar. So we're using the Hebrew calendar, not the years that we have now. The current year in the Hebrew calendar is 5780, which is the number of years going back to the time of Adam and Eve. If you count each verse of the Torah, Deuteronomy 30, verse 3, so our verse up here, is verse number 5708. Amazingly, this verse corresponds to the secular year 1948, the year of the establishment of the modern state of Israel. So you can clearly see how these things are connected. In that year, 5708 or 1948, we had the return and ingathering of all the exiles, the Jewish people, from all the nations where Hashem had scattered them. So they all came back to this modern and established the modern state of Israel. So we have a precedent. Now let's look at something from our time and our year, 5780. So I counted from that verse 72 years to bring us to 5780, and it is in Deuteronomy 32, verse 25. I'm going to give you two translations here. From outside the sword will bereave, and terror from within, young men and maidens, suckling babes with venerable elders. So this force is indiscriminate. It attacks everybody. So here's another translation. The sword shall deal death without, as shall the terror within, to youth and maiden alike, the suckling as well as the aged. Now, when you look at this, the one single entry in the Talmud on this verse, listen to what this says. This is the only entry in the Talmud that quotes this verse. The sages taught, if there is a plague in the city, gather your feet, as in, limit the time you spend out of the house, as it is stated in the verse. And none of you shall go out of the opening of his house until morning. And it says in another verse, come, my people, enter into your chambers and shut your doors behind you. Hide yourself for a little moment until the anger has passed. And then they quote our verse here. And it says, outside the sword will bereave, and in the chambers terror. So what are the odds that verse 5708, which corresponds to the year 2020, is about a plague in the city and quarantining yourself? Quite the coincidence indeed.